So the topic of my presentation today is improving profitability and resilience of livestock enterprises in Western and Northern Queensland. And I'd like to start by acknowledging my co-author on this work, Fred Chudley, who's Principal Economist also with the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. Today, I'll start by giving a description and discussion of the framework and the tools that we've used to assess alternative management strategies and technologies for their impact on the profitability, cash flow and risk of livestock businesses. And I'll give some example results from those analyses as well to demonstrate the value of the framework that we've used and how it can be used. So our project has been funded as part of the Drought and Climate Adaptation Program, and the objective was to provide better information to help livestock managers prepare for, respond to and recover from drought. And the overall objective of that was to help improve drought resilience of grazing properties. So when we're talking about preparing for drought, we're really focusing on building resilience. And so to remain viable and to build resilience, not only to droughts, but also floods, market shocks, property managers need to be regularly producing a profit and building capital. And also we need to determine how we incorporate new technologies and strategies into our businesses to improve profit as well. So the first question we were addressing in our project was how can you assess the profitability and riskiness of alternative strategies? And then what are those strategies that are most likely to improve the profitability and resilience of grazing businesses? So we know that there are numerous alternative management strategies and technologies available to us, and they arrive at an increasing rate. The challenge is to identify those ones that make the livestock production system more efficient, and by that we mean more profitable and resilient. A key point is that analysing just one strategy in isolation doesn't identify the relative benefits to other strategies. So really we need to look at all relevant strategies for a business, and we need to analyse and compare those to each other and to the current system to really identify whether a new technology or strategy will add value to our business. So when you want to test a strategy for your property, what do you need to consider? Well, we believe that you need an approach that looks forward, not backwards, and the farm management economics framework is a method that can do that. So applying this appropriate framework to decision making is critical. The farm management economic analysis framework we have used is a property level analysis. It identifies the change in profit and risk generated by alternative operating systems. It includes changes in unpaid labour, herd structure and capital. Critically, it includes the implementation phase, and we start by estimating the extra return on extra capital invested, and we do that using partial discounted cash flow budgets. Key components of this analysis are the opportunity cost, time value money, marginal thinking, and these are all economics terms that we provide more discussion and explanation of in some other presentations, or one presentation in particular that is available from our project webpage for those interested in learning more about economic methodology. Really important though is that to conduct appropriate economic and financial analyses, we need a really clear understanding of the underlying production systems and the likely biological response to change from implementing a new strategy or technology. In our project, we use the Breed Cow and Dynama suite of programs. This is software developed by our departmental economists, and it's freely available from our departmental website. In our project, we conducted analyses across a whole range or number of regions across Northern Australia, so 5 regions in Queensland and 1 in the Northern Territory. And within each of those regions, we tested a large number of strategies, and these can be broadly categorised into strategies that might improve overall herd biological performance or enterprise profitability, those that improve breeder reproductive performance, strategies that target steer growth rates and improving those, and we also looked at some market alternatives, and these are just some examples there. I'm going to present just a few key examples today, but for those interested in looking at the results for the whole range of strategies for each region, you can go across to our project webpage and access our final reports and summaries from that webpage. So this table here isn't intended to be read. It's just to demonstrate the range of strategies that we looked at within each region. So this is an example of the summary table for the Central Queensland region. And what we were wanting to do for each region is to look across all the relevant management strategies or technologies within a region and look at which of those might improve the profitability of the business, which were likely to make little difference, and which could potentially send you broke over time. And I should just add that most of these changes were suggested as positive changes by the teams, the members of the teams that we worked with, and positive changes because we know they produce a known biological production benefit, so they can increase productivity of our herds or increase growth rates and so forth. So I'll move on now to providing some specific examples to really demonstrate the types of results and the information we can get from using this framework. So the first example I'll present is for the Northern Gulf region of Queensland, and the scenario in this example was all about finding out the optimal age of steer sale or turn off for the property. Now, our representative property that we constructed for the Northern Gulf had a base herd with an age of turn-off split between two cohorts, the majority, 83%, being sold at 29 months and the remainder at 41 months old. So the herd gross margin for that base herd was just under $182,000. And we wanted to look at what difference it would make if we selected different age of steer, sale or turn-off. So we looked at younger ages of turn-off, so at 6 months or 18 months, and you can see that both of those younger ages of turn-off decreased our herd gross margin compared to the base. We also looked at two older ages of turn-off, and you can see that the bullocks sale age was not much different to the base herd, but we were able to improve our herd gross margin if we sold all steers at 41 months of age. So that was just looking at the herd gross margins, but we also wanted to conduct some whole farm economic analysis to look at the returns at the property level if we were starting with this base herd and we wanted to change or move across to selling all of our steers at 41 months of age. So when we did that analysis, we discovered that making that change would add around $32,500 profit every year over 30 years to the business with an internal rate of return of 24%. So that's a very positive result. However, there was a peak deficit in cash flow from making that change of $95,500, which occurred in year 2 of the 30-year analysis, and there was an 8-year payback period. So those two elements could prevent or provide an obstacle for managers to move to that older age of turn-off. Another key point to make about increasing steer sale age is that in this case we were able to significantly add to the profit of the business by doing that, but there's also a benefit in terms of drought risk, because at the same grazing pressure, increasing your sale age of steers will reduce the number of breeders that you have on your property, with obvious reduction in drought risk associated with that. So I'll move on to the second example that I have for you today. This is an example from the Northern Downs region, and it's an example relating to managing prickly acacia, which, as most of the audience would know, is an issue in the Northern Downs area. And the base property that we constructed for this particular analysis, we assumed had 80% of its area with some sort of infestation ranging from low to high across the property. And firstly, we wanted to look at what would be the results of property level control of that prickly acacia in year 1 with maintenance over 30 years. What would be the impact to the business? So that level of control resulted in a very positive internal rate of return of 13%, but required more than $1.3 million to be invested over the first 4 years of that treatment, which is substantial in relation to the base property net starting profit of $169,000 per annum. So it's evident that that level of investment would prevent many properties of that size being able to undertake property level control in that way. And so the next question for us was, if you were going to have a staged approach to prickly acacia control, how should you best do that? And so what we looked at in the next phase of our analyses for prickly acacia was, what is the best return on investment for spending $10,000 on prickly acacia control in year one, plus ongoing maintenance for 30 years? So we've got a limited amount of funds to spend. We want to know how we should best target that to control the prickly acacia. And our analysis looked at returns over 30 years again. And what we were interested in looking at was, should we target areas of minimal prickly acacia density, mosaic, moderate or high densities of prickly acacia for best results. And what the economic analysis showed us here, this is extra profit per annum, was that it was most economically efficient to target areas of prickly acacia of minimal density first, and then as funds allowed, move on to gradually higher density areas of prickly acacia. So the final example I have for you today is relevant to Northern Gulf and Northern Downs regions. And what we were interested in looking at here, or examining here, was the situation where businesses own a property in the Gulf as well as a property in the Downs. And often they are managed as integrated entities. And it's quite common for weaners to be transferred from the Gulf property down to the Downs property. Which also has breeding cattle. So we wanted to really delve into that issue and examine what were the optimal ways to manage those properties. So the first row of data here in this table is when you have a Gulf and a Downs property, both owned within the same business, but managed as separate entities. So they were both breeding and growing properties, but they were managed separately with the optimal or close to optimal age of turn-off of steers for both properties. So in this Gulf property, steers were sold in two cohorts of 29 and 41 months, which was our base herd for the Gulf, and the Downs herd, the steers were turned off at 31 months. So the combined operating profit for those two properties was just under $129,000, where they were managed as separate entities. We then looked at a whole range of scenarios where steers were transferred from our Gulf property to the Downs property for growing out, and the breeding herd on the Downs property was reduced to ensure that the grazing pressure remained constant on that Downs property. So there were still breeders there, but they were reduced in number. So we looked at transferring weaners from the Gulf property, 18-month-old steers, and keeping them for 12 or 24 months, or transferring 30-month-old steers. And you can see that all of those strategies for transferring steers from the Gulf to the Downs reduced the profitability of the overall business compared to this base strategy of operating the properties as separate entities and not transferring steers. So that was an interesting finding for our teams. We looked at one additional strategy here, and that was managing the properties as separate entities again, similar to the first row of data, but instead of running breeders on our Downs block, we would instead run that as a steer turnover or trading operation. And both of those properties run separately, so there was no transfer of steers from the Gulf to the Downs. And you can see that way of managing the business really improved the operating profit, the overall operating profit of the business. So adding over $100,000 per year in operating profit. So again, that was an interesting finding for the teams that we worked with. So that's just a snapshot of results to give you an idea of the sorts of strategies that we looked at and the sorts of insights we got from doing these analyses across the regions. I'll just move on now to providing some key insights across all our regions from the analyses, the combined analyses that we've conducted. And firstly, the point I'd like to make that was for each of those regions that we looked at across Northern Australia, we were able to identify strategies that could substantially improve the profit of the base properties that we looked at. But also, we were able to identify many strategies that really had a negligible effect on annual enterprise profits. So by that we mean not changing the profit by more than $5,000 per annum. And we also identified many strategies that had a negative effect on profit as well. And this was despite producing a positive production response. When we looked for consistently profitable strategies across Northern Australia, the two that stood out were addressing a P deficiency, so a phosphorus deficiency, where relevant, and also introducing perennial legumes that were adapted to the environment. So, for example, stylose or leucaena where suited. Strategies that consistently reduce profitability across Northern Australia included all types of production feedings, so molasses, silage and grain, and annual forage cropping as well, so oats, forage sorghum, lab. When we looked at strategies to improve the reproductive performance of breeders, and so examples are genetic improvement of weaning rate and supplementing first calf heifers to improve their reconception rates, we found either small positive to large negative effects on enterprise profitability. And so what this really emphasised to us and our teams was that it was critically important to implement low-cost strategies to improve profitability wherever we can. And by that we mean strategies like optimising our herd structure. So the example that I provided earlier of optimising our steer sale age and optimising our cow cull age. Another key point to make is that any of our strategies that improve returns required intensification of our business. And we know that that increases demands on manager skills, it can increase income volatility and risk. So that's really important to consider. We also found that inflexible production systems were more risky and less resilient. And examples of that were strategies which affected our market access, like HDPs, or really narrowed down our market choices, so targeting specific or alternative markets like organic beef or Wagyu are examples there. Now, the majority of my presentation so far is focused on the work we have done in relation to preparing for drought through building resilience and trying to work out how to make grazing businesses more profitable, but we've also conducted quite a bit of work to provide information and tools to help in responding and recovering from drought as well. And this is all available on our project page on Future Beef. We've got spreadsheets there, and these are largely or relatively simple spreadsheets that enable us to look at more tactical decisions of destocking as drought hits us and then restocking as we come out of drought. And we have a whole series of recorded presentations available there as well that explain how to use the spreadsheets and talk through examples which are in them. So you can access those from our project webpage. We have 7 presentations relating to drought response decisions, which are largely destocking decisions, and 2 presentations relating to drought recovery decisions, which are largely about getting the cash flow going again and identifying the most efficient way of rebuilding herd structure. So all of those products are available from our Future Beef website and our project page there, and Greg will send out the link after the webinar finishes today. Our regional project reports are available from there as well for download. At present we have our Central Queensland, our Central West Mitchell Grasslands and our Northern Gulf reports. The Northern Downs report will soon be available from there, and the final reports will be available at the end of the year. As I've said, our presentations and spreadsheets can be accessed from there as well, and also links to our scientific publications. Our Northern Territory results are also available from the DAF website, but from a different link, which we'll send out to you after the webinar. And I'll finish up now just with a final concluding slide to really emphasise the key point I'd like to make, and that is that in this project and in other projects where we've used this whole farm economics framework, we've found that the outputs from using that methodology have really enabled producers and managers that we've worked with, as well as research and extension staff who have been part of our teams, to be not only well informed, but to make sound judgments about the likely results of technological change. And that's the key point that I'd like to finish with. Thanks, John, and welcome questions.